Headliners. But first, let's bring you the latest news headlines. And the Prime Minister has today been addressing the House of Commons, saying the new Brexit trade deal for Northern Ireland means businesses and people can now chart a new way forward. Rishi Sunak said the Windsor Framework, as it's known, will deliver smooth flowing free trade across the UK whilst protecting Northern Ireland's sovereignty. This includes the Northern Ireland Assembly being able to stop some EU laws affecting the flow of goods, which he called the Stormont break. Sir Keir Starmer has welcomed the new deal, adding the red and green lane proposal is a good one and has Labour's full support. Well, the Prime Minister said the deal was a decisive breakthrough.
And Mr. Speaker, it does what many said could not be done, removing thousands of pages of EU laws and making permanent, legally binding changes to the Protocol Treaty itself. That is the breakthrough we have made. Those are the changes we will deliver, and now is the time to move forward as one United Kingdom.
Democratic Unionist Party member Ian Paisley says he hopes the deal can meet his party's expectations.
I think it's important that we do look at the legal issues which come forward, but I think it falls some way short in satisfying those tests. That's my gut instinct, and I want to be positive about it. I wanted to try and find somewhere that would allow us to see change.
Well, in other news today, the energy regulator has reduced the cap on how much suppliers can charge customers, but bills are still expected to rise. Ofgem announced the cap on the amount households pay for gas and electricity will drop by almost £1,000 from the 1st of April. However, customers are likely to pay 20% more on their annual bills as the government's additional support only partially protects them. It means the average household will most likely pay £500 more a year than they did last year. Now, the Northern Lights that were seen across the UK on Sunday have been appearing again this evening. Members of the public captured the lights in Scotland, North Wales, Cambridgeshire and Shropshire. But there was also a rare sighting in southern England as the aurora borealis reached as far south as Essex, Kent and, we're told, even Cornwall. On TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Time for Headliners.
Good evening, welcome to Headliners. I'm your host Simon Evans. Joining me tonight to take you through Tuesday's top stories, we have two comedians, often outnumbered but never outgunned, Francis Foster and Nick Dixon. How are you both? All right?
Delighted to be here.
Excellent. Bit of a clash on the dress codes. Looking like the hoodlum and his brief.
Francis has chosen comfort because it's very hot here. I've chosen, looking presentable.
You are presentable. Does that mean you want to be the presenter?
Well, I didn't want to say. I don't want to say so.
Well, dress for the job you're after, that's what they say. Take a look at Tuesday's front pages. We'll start with the Daily Mail. Has Rishi done the impossible? That's a picture of Prince Charles, in fact, shaking hands with Ursula von der Leyen. But Rishi has done the important negotiating. Telegraph has Sunak. My deal is a new way forward. There he is, directing the lady in question. Accordingly, the iPaper, Sunak secures breakthrough on Brexit as tensions loom. The Guardian, PM hails new chapter in relations with EU after Northern Ireland deal. The Mirror have gone off-piste with Evil's End. Serial killer's ashes were scattered at beauty spot, says Nice. A bizarre choice. Metro, you can put the oven on. That is a reference to the oven-ready deal, I think. And finally, the Daily Star. It's all happening in the world right now. Mexico, President believes they have caught an actual elf. So those were your front pages. So, as you will have noticed, gentlemen, one story predominated. Let's take a look at the Daily Mail's front cover for their take on it.
Yes, they've got, has Rishi done the impossible? And they're saying so many thought it couldn't be done, but as PM hails historic Ulster deal with the EU, the threat of Tory rebellion appears to melt away. So the Mail is very bullish on this. They think the threat of the rebellion's gone. Rishi smashed it. Of course, they don't mention the DUP. They mention it within the piece. That's the big question. What are the DUP going to make of it? Because they did feel they were left out of the negotiations, from what I gather. And just for the viewer, if you don't know all the details of this deal, basically there are three main areas. There's the free flow of trade, where they're going to have these green lanes for the products that will be sold domestically in Northern Ireland, and red lanes for the ones that will be moved on to the Republic of Ireland. Yeah. And there's going to be data sharing between UK and EU to stop smuggling. There's a single market issue, where the Northern Ireland was under the EU regulations for state aid, alcohol duty and VAT. The deal fixes that. And then there's the ECJ issue, the fact that they'll be under the jurisdiction of the ECJ, which is sort of controversial, because the EU says, well, if you're part of the single market, you have to be part of the ECJ. So there was talk of them having a sort of Norway. This gives a sort of Norway-style deal we've heard about Norway-style deal for Northern Ireland. So anyway, it's all a bit complicated. We all have to become experts on the Northern Ireland protocol.
It sounds like you've grasped it quite well, Nick.
Those are the basics. But the problem is, what did the DUP think of it? That's the big question. Which latest I saw is that we still don't know.
What are their sentiments likely to be, do you think?
Well, they've been very sceptical. They've been saying we've not been involved in the negotiation process. Yeah. Sunak seems to have gone for let's get this good deal, and then we'll just show it to them, and they'll just be happy because it'll be so good, rather than involve them. But the criticism was, why didn't he at least tell them, even though they have to be quite secretive negotiations, why didn't he give them an indication of what it was going to be?
Yeah. And Boris, too, is keeping his powder dry, Francis.
Well, absolutely. And the DUP have actually said they were quite understanding at the start of negotiations. They said it will take as long as it takes. The most important thing is that we get a good deal, and a good deal for Northern Ireland. And the worry is that if the DUP don't like the deal, if that side of the argument isn't on board, it could very well scupper the deal. And in a worst-case scenario, we could see tensions between Catholics and Protestants being inflamed again, particularly when it comes to the border.
Quiet. I know a lot of people, I remember having rows on Twitter where people were saying that there had been a cavalier attitude amongst the Westminster elite towards Brexit, which actually that wasn't true because Westminster didn't want it to happen. But the Brexit vote had, thrown the peace process under the bus in order to separate from Europe. In reality, it's actually, I know there's been a flare-up recently, but there's been an extraordinary degree of calm and patience, really, I think, in terms of sectarian violence over the last 6 years.
Well, I think that what both sides realise is that this needs to be done properly. And it's really, really important that they get it right, because if they don't get it right, then what is going to happen is that this is going to cause a rupture within relations that is going to cause flare-ups and tensions. So it's important for every side that not that they're happy, but that they're content with the deal.
Hope that the DUP don't decide to put a spanner in the works just on principle. We have the Daily Star now, Francis, with an important story about mythical Mexican beings.
Well, you always give me the more intellectual one, so I'm very happy about that. But Mexico's president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador...
That's why we give it to you.
Exactly, mate.
It's your Venezuelan upbringing.
Exactly, and I know, because I know the language. Anyway, he shared a photo that he says shows an alex, a forest creature which is like an elf or a leprechaun, and he said the words, everything is mystical. So there we go.
Is that Spanish?
Yeah, exactly.
An alex, so it's got an X at the end, a bit like Latinx.
Yes.
When he says everything is mystical, not everything, like the Northern Ireland Protocol isn't mystical, is it? When he says everything...
Quite mystical, actually.
Yeah. How many people genuinely understand the Northern Ireland Protocol?
I think it's just me.
Is it expressed in the form of myth and allegory? Is that what you mean, or it doesn't really exist?
Well, what did he mean, do you think?
To be honest with you, no one really knows what he meant. It could have been that he genuinely meant that this creature was alive. Alternatively, he might have been on the old sauce, on the old tequila. Had a few swigs, and then possibly, because we know some tequila has hallucinogenic properties, seen an alex.
But there is, with the camera itself that has taken the picture of this alex, can't have been feeling the effects of peyote or various mushrooms.
That's what I was thinking of.
That's the one, yeah.
Peyote, that's the one, isn't it? They go sort of into the woods and everyone paints themselves blue and they all vomit.
There's a lot of powerful hallucinogens there, but there is an actual photograph of the alex here. It's hiding in a tree. To me, it looks more like a gremlin, not a gremlin, a sort of like a cowled, like a I don't know, like something almost like a like a little tiny saint or something.
Do you think it's someone waiting to try and cross over the US border and just hiding in the tree? I think that's possible.
Yeah.
I hate to take the fun out of it, but it looks possible to me.
Incidentally, there's another story on the front page where it says COVID bats off the hook. And what it actually looks like when you look at it is exactly the same picture, but upside down. I
So maybe they've just used both.
Has this Alex been tested for COVID? That's the question.
And then finally, because most of the papers have covered the same Northern Ireland protocol story, the Daily Mirror has veered off into the ditch with a really quite unnecessary and meaningless story about the final resting place of the ashes of the Yorkshire Ripper.
Yeah, I took this one a little bit personally. It says Evil's End. So Peter Sutcliffe's ashes have been scattered in Arnside in Cumbria, obviously my home county, and I don't recall being asked if this was okay. There was no meeting of the sort of local, my mum's like president of the local WI. I don't think she was consulted on this. Do we really want these ashes in Cumbria? But apparently that's where they are, according to his niece.
I think ashes don't... I mean, unless it's private ground. I know Arsenal football ground and so on get requests, like dozens, and they do have to knock them back because otherwise it'd be playing on rubble. It'd be hard core just on the centre spot. But I think the national parks, you're allowed to just go in there and toop whoever you want in there, aren't you?
I would like to have been consulted, Simon. That's
do you think of it as like evil grit?
Yeah, I suppose they are evil ashes if there's such a thing.
Yeah. I don't know that I do believe in it. But having said that, it is a bit of a shame to think that, you wander up there and then you go, oh, yes, that bloke who killed all those prostitutes with a hammer.
Well, I live
drifting
where...
across
But you know what? There's a lot of ladies who like watching that sort of content on Netflix.
We're going to be coming back to that.
I went on a date and we walked past Dennis Nilsson's house.
Yeah.
And that's actually a point of interest for many women. So you think that's not a good date idea? It turns out it is.
Yeah. Well, we saw the list of the best dates recently, didn't we? And was it going to the cinema and the restaurant were all well down the list?
Dennis Nilsson's house. Right on there.
A tour of North London serial killers.
Yeah.
A quick mention for Betty Boothroyd, who has died at the age of 93. A good innings. I don't know how we feel about her. Obviously, she was a trailblazer for women's elevation to senior office in the House, but she was also very pro-EU. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think, a lot of politicians, let's be honest, are very pro-EU.
Yes.
She was a real trailblazer, like you said. She was somebody who really made her mark. When people talked about the Speaker, I think she served from 92 to 2000.
Yeah.
But people actually imagined Betty Boothroyd. They didn't think of a man. She was an iconic figure within Parliament. And
a bit like the Queen, wasn't she, in that regard? She was there, she was obviously political, but she made it feel more like it was an emblematic stage.
I wasn't following it as closely then, but as I recall, she was far less overtly partial than Bercow, for example.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. She certainly towered above him in all regards. Probably still does, despite being dead. So there we have it. Unless you want to talk about £10 off at some supermarket, I think we've done the front pages. That's those done. Join us after the break for online radicalisation, teenage brides, drunk Frenchmen, and a few news stories as well. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView, Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners with me, Simon Evans, and my panel of comedians. I don't know if 2 people is a panel. I feel like it needs to be 3, really. But anyway, they can only be described as mixed ability. Francis Foster and Nick Dixon. And they're just discussing during the break whether fascism was really right-wing. That's the level we're on, ladies and gentlemen. So, a story now about one of our own. And Rees-Mogg has challenged the King's decision. Fortunately, GB News staff outranked the monarchy, Francis.
Yes,
so
indeed. So this is in the eye, and the tensions over Cross decision for King to meet von der Leyen as Northern Ireland deal sealed. So he met with the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, just 90 minutes after her and Rishi agreed a Brexit deal. And a lot of people are quite upset about that, and in my opinion, quite rightly so, because a monarchy should always be apolitical. And by King Charles going out to meet von der Leyen, he's become a political figure. And the reality is, the reason why Queen Elizabeth II was so beloved in this country is because she stayed away from politics.
Yes.
You didn't know what her political opinions were, therefore unifying the country. I think Charles is in a little bit of dodgy ground here.
You might be projecting a little bit of meaning into the meeting. He didn't come out and go, I think it's a terrific deal, and if the DUP don't snap this up their mugs, did he? I mean, that would have been a bit...
Not to our knowledge. I mean, the thing is, whose fault is it? Because Rishi is basically saying it's down to the King to decide. Buckingham Palace has suggested it was on government advice. So they're both passing the buck. Yes, ideally, he shouldn't be doing these kind of things. I agree. It's so funny. I mean, even Chris Bryant has condemned it, and, you know, there's a stopped clock thing there. Occasionally, even Chris Bryant is right.
Yes.
But I love... Rees-Mogg's quote is brilliant here. He said, it was constitutionally unwise to involve the King in a matter of immediate political controversy. Always phrased so perfectly, so
elegant.
Constitutionally unwise. I agree with that. And the only thing that I think is people say, well, he had to meet von der Leyen like he has to meet, an array of world leaders. Doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Timing, though,
my argument is she really like a proper leader? I don't really recognise her as a... If you met Joe Biden, I'd say fair enough, even though I hate him.
No, you have to recognise that. You do have to recognise she's a leader. Well, only in regards... I mean, otherwise the timing isn't. It doesn't matter. Because if she's not a leader, then it's fine. But the point is that she was the person with whom Sunak was negotiating.
Yeah.
So in that regard, she was clearly in executive authority.
Yeah, well, what I'm saying is, to me, it's not on the level of if you meet someone like Biden, of course you have to meet the President of the United States. So, he probably didn't, in my opinion, have to meet her.
I mean, it would be ideal if he was to just meet the sort of Nelson Mandelas of his day, wouldn't it? You know, the sort of whoever those are at any given moment, those who are sort of above and beyond
above the fray.
partisan. But the reality is that Charles has spent most of a long visible career, unlike Elizabeth, in a role, in a kind of waiting room role, but demonstrating a good deal more political partisan positions on everything from the environment to architecture. I mean, this is what we've been waiting for, isn't it? To see whether he's going to start getting involved.
And I think he will start getting involved because he's always expressed political opinions. He's always stepped into the fray. So if he's been doing that throughout his entire adult life, why is he going to stop now that he's king?
He's not. That's the point. It's good to be king. So, the eye now, and do we have a growing problem with online radicalisation? That depends on your blog, I suppose, Nick.
Who wrote that? Yeah, this is Priti Patel calls for shake of UK counter-terror laws. So we obviously had the Shawcross review into Prevent, which basically found that they weren't being strict enough on Islamic terrorism, but they were calling everything far-right terrorism, including Jacob Rees-Mogg and the works of William Shakespeare.
Yes.
So completely absurd.
Anyone who owned a copy of George Orwell's 1984, somewhat ironically.
Absolutely disgusting nonsense. And so she's basically, obviously, coming off the back of that, and she's saying that we need to do more. And she's sort of saying that the definition of terrorism is wrong. We need to really clamp down on what it is and figure out. And it's basically just different ways of saying, what are we doing about terrorism? It's an absolute mess.
But in particular, she did draw attention, which I was interested to, the sort of culture developing in schools.
Yeah. And clearly she meant the Quran thing, I would suggest, the other day where, Quran was dented and 4 children were suspended.
Smudged.
She said she was deeply, deeply concerned about certain religious and cultural values dominating within schools. Yeah, and then elsewhere, she basically tries to sort of talk about multiculturalism in a cautious way. She says, I do think we have wider problems around integration. I'm quite alarmed. Integration has become a dirty word. It's deeply, deeply concerning. I think it's a very precarious situation. So, yeah. She's trying to say...
No, her language was pretty strong, wasn't it? Go on.
Yeah, but the thing is I think we can all agree Priti Patel was a useless Home Secretary. She was useless. She didn't sort out things like illegal immigration. She didn't sort the boats coming over. She talked a good game, ultimately achieved nothing. And here she is, popping up. It's like a football manager who's been a manager of a team, they've been rubbish, they've been fired, and all of a sudden they go, well, here's my opinion. Who cares what your opinion is?
Yeah, sort of Ralph Rangnick. Well, this is what all politicians do now. They have no control over anything. You've noticed this. So Suella Braverman, Priti Patel, whoever it is, politicians, former politicians, they'll pop up, but they don't control their own departments because they're controlled by the blob, aren't they?
Is she totally without portfolio at the moment? She has no response, not minister at all, not in the government?
No, I don't think she is in the government, no.
Oh, OK. I was under the impression she still had some job. I mean, I understand what you're saying, and certainly, it's been a disappointing few years for the Tories in terms of controlling immigration and in terms of minimising the threat, the growing threat that comes from Islamic terrorism and so on. But I don't think I would necessarily want to not hear from former Home Secretaries just because they hadn't previously managed to achieve their aims. In a way, that's the point at which they get quite interesting, when they can come out and say, the reason we couldn't do anything is because the civil service is this vast, amorphous blob that just absorbs any attempt you make to change the legislation necessary.
But the problem is with that is then you go, well, all you're doing then is giving yourself an excuse. I mean, take Thatcher. She came into this country when we were known as the sick man of Europe. There could have been quite easily a million reasons for her to go, I couldn't make it work because of X, Y and Z. But she didn't do that. We need politicians of that calibre on both left and right. And to me, Priti Patel isn't it. And I'm not particularly interested in what she has to say.
But I see Sam's point. It's the only time they get to tell the truth. Like when Savage Javid just said he's not standing again. The NHS doesn't work.
Yeah. As he scarfers.
Yeah.
The Guardian next, the story about Shamima Begum. And you can say what you want about Shamima, but her OnlyFans is worth every penny. Begum's Bake Off. That's what I want to see, isn't it? Come on.
There you go.
The potential is there.
And we're both edging out of the camera. There you go. You can cancel yourself, mate. No, so this is a terrorism advisor, Jonathan Hall, King's Counsel, has said that Shamima Begum should be allowed back into the UK. He's a top government terrorism advisor. And he's making the point, which I agree with. She needs to be brought back into this country, and then she needs to face charges, and she needs to face justice.
Squad.
Yes, a firing squad. Justice for her crimes. And
I mean, apart from anything else, I kind of agree with you, although my main feeling is I cannot believe we are still wasting so much time and effort talking about her at all. I mean, the number of people...
It's a slow news day, Simon.
Yeah, well, I'm going to disagree with Francis, but I first want to say, yeah, the discourse around Shamira Begum is ridiculous. I mean, all these liberal commentators, I saw somebody there, I won't name them because they appear on this channel sometimes, but they described her as flawed. I'm like, flawed? I mean, Dominic Raab is flawed because he allegedly threw a tomato when he was stressed. You know, that's flawed. Shamira Begum she did evil things and she showed no remorse.
She did evil things at a pretty early age, and I know it is kind of 50-50. I'm one of those people who says, yes, Shamima Begum should be allowed to make mistakes at 15, and no, we shouldn't be listening to Greta Thunberg, who is the same age, you know, for exactly the same reasons. You know, but I don't think you can. I don't think you can like hold somebody responsible for the rest of their life for making a mistake. If she's committed a crime which on statute says you're no longer a citizen, but that isn't the case.
Well,
is it?
my thoughts on that. One thing is people say, oh, it's racist, but we revoked Jack Letz's citizenship, so there is precedent. The other thing is. So it's not racist, but the other thing is this. Yeah, Peter Hitchens even said we need to give her, bring her into the country and try it. So did Lord Sumption. So I understand that. My thought on that is that although logically and rationally that should happen in a functioning judicial system, but what we have is a country where everything's so broken, people are almost just glad that like one non-liberal thing has happened. Do you know what I mean? They're almost just like,
I do understand that, and I also genuinely, I mean, to reverse everything I said in the introduction, I have a terrible fear that she will end up back here and she will get her own series on Channel 4.
Well, that's it.
Renovating
BBC
houses
podcast.
or something.
Yeah.
I mean, but anyway, on to the Daily Mirror now. The legal age for marriage has been raised to 18. This seems to be quite significant news, actually, but perhaps from your point of view, especially, Nick, I don't know.
What does that mean? I think that is probably libelous.
No, he doesn't work for the BBC, Simon, come on.
Yeah, that is shocking. For the listeners, Simon just made that up from nowhere. There's no, like, secret story behind that.
Baseless
It is to avoid predators,
I'm
not suggesting you genuinely are, but this is the idea, right? It's to avoid...
Explain it in court.
So it's it's not 16-year-olds marrying each other. The point
no, this is about the age of consent for marriage. It was you could get married at 16 or 17 with parents' consent. Now it's just going to be 18, full stop. Yeah. It's shocking that we need this law, but apparently we now do in our country. So, so it's a good law. I mean, the funny thing is, people aren't even rational till they're 25. Their brains aren't fully developed, so we should probably up it to 25.
But is this been put in place to protect girls from specific cultures where the parents might be attempting to impose an arranged marriage on them? Because traditionally, the age of consent and the age of marriage was the point at which the children could defy their parents. But this sounds as if it's the other way around. This is like the law stopping the parents, forcing the child to get married.
One imagines that is why it's come in.
Which is pretty shocking in itself, isn't it, in the week when we've seen blasphemy laws reintroduced in schools and so on. What do you want to say?
Well, I was just going to say that this actually looks like a very interesting law, and I think the thing that's actually most interesting about this story is the reticence people have to talk about it.
Yeah.
And the reasons that it was brought in. And like a lot of things that happen in this country, we do not feel able to talk comfortably about these issues, particularly if it's with cultures that are different from our own.
My friend Sam Ashworth-Hayes, who occasionally appears on this channel, put out a tweet today to the effect that he said people just don't know how to talk about this stuff without sounding prejudiced, and they end up always saying it's an open goal for the far right. This just creates a talking point for the far right because people are afraid of themselves sounding far right for saying no, this is wrong. We shouldn't be tolerating cultures that do this kind of thing. You know.
Well, some people sound and look more far right than others. Do you know what I mean? If it was me, and I was just like, the thing is, mate,
just wear long-sleeve shirts and you'll be fine. Anyway, that's it for part 2. Join us after the break for children's books, cute squirrels, and hardcore pornography. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back to Headliners. We'll get straight back into it with Tuesday's Guardian. And does all pornography encourage violence to women? Of course not, just the kind that women like, it turns out. But Nick?
Don't know what that's about, but yeah, MPs urge crackdown on pornography to tackle violence against women, and the claim is that watching porn will lead to actual violence. I'm never certain because it's in The Guardian, but maybe it does. I don't know. They claim there's evidence for it, but I don't really see it in the article. But it's always tricky, isn't it? Obviously, anything involving children is absolutely disgusting, and those people should be punished in whatever way we can. But should porn be banned, or is it, as a libertarian type person, you think, oh, it's ridiculous to try and control porn? But for the good of society, it's obviously not a good thing, is it? And men, to their shame, it said Pornhub was visited by 15 million UK adults in just September. 50% of men, 16% women. So it's 50%.
There are some interesting stats on it. I know, and I don't want to expose too much sort of awareness of what's been going on. I do know for a fact that Pornhub have sort of cleaned up their act quite a bit. And it is still hardcore pornography by any standards, but they have taken some fairly serious measures, I believe, over the last few years to limit the amount of content that remotely looks like it's actually happening, for instance. Do you know what I mean? Like there's a, you know what I mean, like candid camera type stuff or whatever. It feels very much more tame now, but it's still way on from, I mean, it's 1,000-old tatty, dog-eared stand-up comedy routines about, in my day, porn used to come in a carrier bag, in a ditch, and you had to peel the pages apart,
Didn't you used to write like pornographic
Oh,
stuff
I used
yourself?
to write porn myself as well, yes, briefly. Well, it was readers' letters. It wasn't sort of, I wasn't like heavily involved in the industry. It was
Weren't you the precursor to 50 Shades of Grey, essentially?
I guess I was, and if I'd seen which way the wind was blowing, I felt it was on the way out then. But yeah, I mean, like kids, young people can see extraordinarily graphic acts now at an age where perhaps, it can be, I don't know.
But it's also the parents' responsibility when it comes to giving children smartphones. The reality is no child under the age of 16 should have a smartphone.
No.
There is no need for them. They shouldn't be on social media.
I don't think wives should have them either.
No, I completely agree with you. It should just
wives
be for
and
the men.
servants.
Well, yeah, exactly. Finally,
No, I'm
someone's
with you,
saying
though,
it
really.
like it is, Simon. I've always liked you, mate.
The only other concern is that they're going to use it, though, to beef up the online safety bill. The online safety bill terrifies me because it's just the online censorship bill, basically, and Ofcom's going to have far too much involvement, and it's all very questionable. So, obviously, porn, not a great thing for society, but also clamping down on the internet too much, also not good.
It is. I mean, it's a great thing for an individual to restrict their access to it if they can. I do believe that. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's going to be an extraordinarily blunt instrument that's used to rid us of a few problematic cases. The Telegraph next, and there's a nasty stereotype that French politicians are all drunken sleazebags. Fortunately, we have a story here that confirms that nasty trope. Let's have a look.
Yes, indeed. French MPs face alcohol ban after heavy boozing disrupts parliamentary sessions. So we all know that the French don't like working, and it turns out that when they get into Parliament, they like nothing better, the parliamentarians, than having a few beers or a few cognacs and then actually just indulging in a bit of fisticuffs. And what happened is they were having a debate about pension reforms. Yeah, and these things get pretty feisty,
Any red-blooded Frenchman thinking about pension reforms?
Exactly. Just try and stop them, Simon.
Bound to heat up.
Yeah, and it descended into a brawl, and this isn't an isolated incident.
Right.
So this has been happening quite a few times in the French Parliament, and if anything, it makes politics more exciting, so I don't know what the problem is.
You've got to be careful, haven't you, with these things? It all sounds quite fun and games, but we know there was a punch-up in a House of Commons bar that basically changed the course of history, don't we? What was his name? Was it Eric Blair? Remember, what was his... No, that's George Orwell.
That was Eric Arthur Blair, yeah.
What was his name? I'm always forgetting his name. There was a fellow, he was a Scottish MP, or at least an MP in Scotland. He had a punch-up in the bar. He was deselected as a result. They had a by-election for him. They changed the rules. It's how they ended up with Corbyn, which is how we ended up with Brexit.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Partygate stuff, but which wasn't... OK. Yeah, well, look, this is obviously tricky. They're trying to ban this, so it's obviously very hard to stop French people drinking at any time. What I like is that they blame night work. They say, well, the only European Parliament's working. What are we supposed to do? And thinking, hang on, I work at night 3 nights a week, 2 more nights in my other job, and that's why I'm a heroin addict, of course. It escalates.
GBNews are extraordinarily severe about that sort of thing as well, aren't they? I know that they, any attempt to just transfer vodka or whiskey to the mug.
Yeah, you tried it.
On top
you
of
found
that,
out the hard way.
Cameras everywhere.
Yeah, but there was that little brief period, Simon, where you were off air because of the incident.
When it was the Wild West, before things settled down. We know where we are now. The Guardian now, and parents are spending less on books for their children. Thank heavens for drag queens, I guess.
Yeah, cost of living crisis. 1 in 5 parents spend less on books for their children. It's just another... This is the thing, it's a vicious cycle, isn't it, we're into now, because now we have cost of living, now you can't afford books for your kids, they get a worse education, then they do worse in life, and lockdowns were another part of that. And, it's a terrible thing. I mean, people don't care about this or think about this, but 20% of parents and carers say they're spending less on books for their children, and this increased to 36% for those who were struggling financially. 10% were too stressed to even read to their child. And the only good news is that sensitivity readers have ruined books anyway.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
Kids probably shouldn't read the new Roald
My
Dahl.
wife spent an extraordinary amount on books when our kids were young, and my daughter read them all avidly, and my son, I still don't think, has finished a book under, that he's not been required to specifically for school. It doesn't... I'm not sure you can force it to down there. Do you know what I mean? I think there's a kind of sense that if you furnish the house with books, then the child grows up to be this incredible... actually, children, if they're into reading, they'll root them out. They'll find them somewhere. They'll exchange them at school like football stamps. And if they're not into it, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And actually, for me, this just shows the importance of libraries. There was a spate a few years back where a lot of libraries were being closed down. People were saying, what's the point in libraries? We have the internet. We don't need books. But actually... For children's education, for their reading comprehension, for their focus, for their concentration, reading is so important, and particularly for their imagination.
I will say, I think one of the best things you can do as a parent, especially because parents do want to be engaged with their kids, but often don't know what to say, actually reading them stories at bedtime is quite nice. And it does it creates a great rhythm.
We used to read The Hobbit. It was great. I think you've taken an extraordinarily laissez-faire attitude towards reading this. So you're basically saying, let a kid be feral if that's what they want.
All I'm saying is I think there's a middle-class anxiety. Oh, have we got enough books? You don't need that many books. Once you get the ball rolling, children will find them. But you're right, libraries are good. But also, I will say, Oxfam Bookshop and other second-hand bookshops now, loads of children's books for a couple of quid. OK, maybe, you know, if money is really tight, you can't afford that. But a couple of quid, a book will last you for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I think most of us, if you're honest, you can budget and work around that. But what you have to then do is, like, exchange them back and forth and keep them circulating, you know. There does seem to be a lot of evidence. I remember one of Malcolm Gladwell's books about education, which, you know, some people would pick holes in what he says. But anyway, his point was, it's actually during the holidays that gaps open up between middle-class households and working-class households. Because when children are in school, they're all under pressure to read all the time and to engage. But it's part of a middle-class kind of anxiety is that they encourage. So I'm contradicting myself. But there is there is some sort of evidence to suggest that it, you know, is quite a good idea to at least have a few books lying around the kids can read if they want to.
Well, there's actually a lot of evidence educationally, and that is why the lockdowns were so devastating and shutting schools was so devastating, particularly for working class kids.
Absolutely
because
true.
Friends of mine who are still in the teaching profession say that when they came back, the gulf between the working class kids and the middle class kids was enormous.
Well, there we go. There's Gladwell's point. That's interesting. Now, on to the Daily Star, Francis. Elon Musk is calling for a colourblind society, which is fine, I suppose, if you're trying to sell self-driving cars, of course.
Yes, absolutely. He says that the media is racist to whites and Asians, and he wants a colourblind society. And it comes after Scott Adams, creator of the popular Dilbert comic, basically had a meltdown online where he said that black people were a hate group.
Yeah.
And
did you watch it?
Yes, I did indeed.
Yeah.
And it was
Would you personally characterise it genuinely as a meltdown? Because he looked pretty cool to me.
No. He always plans everything, Scott Adams. Definitely wasn't a meltdown, but carry on.
Yeah, but so to me, when I saw it, well, the reason I called it a meltdown is I couldn't see why he did it. I couldn't see what value he was
bored of drawing cartoons.
Maybe he just wanted to go out in a blaze of glory.
He's done extraordinary. I followed him on Twitter since 2015. He was the first person to call it for Trump, long before anyone thought he'd even make it to the candidature. And he's written some interesting books about you know, how different people see the same news event through different prisms and so on. He's no idiot. He was referring, of course, to a poll, you'll be aware of this, Rasmussen poll, in which 50% of the black population either didn't agree with the phrase "it's okay to be white" or couldn't say whether how they felt about it.
Yeah. So I don't think it's very complicated. It's almost too much for this little segment. But Scott Adams says he's done a lot following it, and I've been watching all of it. And so he's always been very liberal. He's always been actually pro. Even he said we should have reparations through taxation. So he's been very, very liberal. And he says that the reason if black people do struggle in America, it's because of systemic racism. So he actually has a lot of very left-wing ideas. And what he was saying though was, it's very complicated what he's saying. He's justified it. And he pointed out one thing that was interesting, that the people cancelling him are all white liberals who live in separate neighbourhoods, who don't live in the inner city. And he basically, he claims that it wasn't in any way racist. And it would seem strange for someone that liberal to suddenly make a racist statement.
Well, it's not come out of anywhere. Of course, this is revealed preference over, virtue signalling. The reality is that the middle-class white population in America are forever trying to set up gated developments away from ethnically mixed neighbourhoods. I mean, all he's done is acknowledge something that millions of people have spent their entire lives doing.
Well, but he also says, like, stay the hell away from them, for instance.
Yeah.
That was
strongly put.
The hate group phrase he admitted was hyperbole.
Yeah.
What he said was two things. He said he was using race as a proxy for class, as in he was saying he was just doing it as a sort of, if certain neighbourhoods struggle, then wouldn't it be logical to get away from them? And he said he was using race as a proxy. And the other thing, I'm trying to remember the other thing, because his justification for it is a bit sort of complicated. I can't remember the other thing he said, but he's just...
Well,
you have to watch all the follow-up.
I think reasonably, you say if there is a group of people of whom half have said that they're not sure if it's not OK to hate you on the strength of your skin colour, that makes that group a hate group.
Yeah, the other thing I remember, he was saying the media has encouraged that attitude.
Of course
and he was just replying.
But Musk's point, which is the headline, of course, which we should acknowledge, Musk is simply saying that the pendulum has swung too far the other way. Well, that we can probably all agree with, right?
Yes, we can absolutely agree with that. And with what Musk is saying. And the problem is an overcorrection in attitudes when it comes to race and swinging the pendulum swinging too far the other way, is that inevitably there will be a backlash and there will be a reaction to this fact. So I don't understand why people are trying to push these types of narratives.
Agree. Finally, Nick, we'll have to get this one done quickly before the break. Daily Mail and the Grey Squirrels are in the crosshairs. Grey Squirrels, presumably some sort of Nazi youth group or something, I don't know.
No, yeah, it's a dog whistle. It's a squirrel whistle. Because, they're being paid to kill grey squirrels. And it is part of the post-Brexit revamp of subsidies because they don't have to spend money on things like the common agricultural policies. So actually, there was always this sort of joke that, like, the grey squirrels are sort of some sort of proxy for immigrants. But now it turns out it is all about Brexit. We want to take back control of our squirrels, get out of the EU and bring back the red squirrel by killing all the grey ones.
But I remember when I was, 14, 15, I was at school, there was a lad there called Andy Lewis who had definitely got proof that the police would give you £1.50 for a squirrel's tail. And we all went out with catapults into the woods.
So this is a systemic version of that.
This was 1976, 1977, and the squirrel already had a bounty on its head even then,
Wow. Sounds like an Enid Blyton story.
I don't know that we ever got one. We used to have those slingshots with the sort of the wrist brace, that you pull back.
Like
they were quite powerful.
But they're worried about minks because the mink attacked the water vole. And who is going to ever speak up for the water vole, Simon? And now they need to.
I'm so fond of little woodland animals like that. Their names, the vole and the mink and
it's like
weasel.
Wind in the willows.
Mink are vicious.
Oh, I don't care what they're like, really. I just have a sort
No, but he's saying take out the mink to save the water voles.
Yeah,
really?
Simon's
well, I just want them all to live in peace. But you're right. If you find anyone...
It's naive, Simon.
Sylvania. That's it for this part. After the break, in the final section, we'll have sex pests, of course, evil robots and Sam Smith. Surprisingly, those are all separate stories. See you in a couple of minutes.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pearce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me,
Lawrence Fox on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Welcome back to Headliners. Sorry you missed the interval chat about whether the Beach Boys are better than the Beatles this time around.
They
go from fascism to 60s pop in a heartbeat. So we'll jump back into it with Tuesday's Times now and our creepy men ruining gyms for women. Well, don't ask me. My gym doesn't even let women in. Well, I say gym, it's more of a sauna, really. But anyway, Francis.
So, yes, thank you for giving this to me, to the producers. So, sex pests leave gyms unfit for women is the headline. And apparently the story is a lot of women are no longer feeling safe at the gym because of uninvited approaches, shall we just say, from men. And there has been a rash of videos on social media.
There's been a rash.
Yes, a rash
which is being produced in court as evidence.
Yeah, exactly, a rash of videos on social media, which is allegedly showing men behaving in creepy and sinister fashion. Some of them do, some of them don't. And there's one particular influencer who's called Natalie Barnett who says the answer and the solution to this is to set up female-only gyms.
Segregation. Couldn't agree more, I have to say. I remember not that long ago, in my lifetime, there were male-only gyms, and then women demanded that they be allowed to come into male-only gyms, and then women started dressing in absurdly sexualised gym gear, whereas blokes go in wearing a pair of shorts and a filthy vest. Women now have lycra that would look slutty on a dance floor, let alone in a workout space. And then they get surprised when they attract one or two peeping toms who like lurking around the exercise equipment, you know, trying to catch a glimpse of camel toe. I'm absolutely appalled by the hypocrisy of these women. They are absolutely disgraceful. Most blokes would much rather go...
I've never seen this work.
Most blokes would much rather go to a single-sex space to work out. They know they don't look at their best, most of them. They'd rather talk to other blokes about working out and about weight tips and maybe could you spot me. They don't want to be aware that they're like grunting and groaning like while there's women walking around drinking from expensive water bottles. I'm absolutely sick of it.
I feel like we have to stand up and applaud. That was like I'm just imagining the replies to this tweet when it comes out. It'll be like, 3 men talking about women at a gym.
I've been waiting so long to say that.
An impassioned rant, Simon. That was Simon Evans' monologue at its finest. But I agree. I mean, it's funny that we've come full circle. We've ended up with women requesting separate spaces, and this is it's probably where we're going to go. I was at a gentleman's club the other day. No women allowed. Simpler times, Francis.
Yeah.
Men smoking cigars, talking about the empire.
It's just quieter as well. You can get more done.
And you can work in and out of a machine. If you've got like a series, you have the actual, you've got your free weights and you've got your aerobics, but you've also got, this is for people, obviously you guys know because you're experienced, but if you don't go to gyms, there are a lot of machines which have a weight stack and they're connected by cables and so on. Yeah. You're supposed to leave at least 90 seconds, sometimes 3 minutes between sets, right? So that your muscles can re-oxygenate and so on. And if you're working in a gym which is busy, it's quite handy to be able to work in with somebody, as it said. So, I do my set, then I stand up and you can quickly pull your prong out, stick it in a low or whatever and do your set, back in and out. No bloke wants to do that with women. Because you can't walk up to a woman and go, mind if I work in with you here? Because it's creepy and weird.
On TikTok.
Yeah, exactly. But you can do it with other blokes. So if you've got 100 blokes in a gym, they can actually all work in with one another. 50 blokes and 50 women, the place is jammed.
Look, Simon, I just want to say that TikTok video of you that we saw, I think was a disgusting misrepresentation.
I had genuinely dropped my sandwich.
Simon Evans works in.
Anyway, the Telegraph now. I'm going to become such a social media star, one way or another. Telegraph now. This Nando's employee has taken cheeky to another level, Nick.
Yep. This is a Nando's cleaner who demanded 20k after he saw a staff member drop a burger on the floor. This is Martin Kumi. 20 grand. He'd been working there 9 days. I know, it's incredible.
The grift.
This is why this country is failing, I'm afraid. 9 days,
superb.
He started recording people's conversations, which is incredible. The extensive recordings, the judge said, and it said you were clearly just making yourself a nuisance to negotiate a payoff. Absolutely shocking.
Fantastic.
Although, to be fair to him, He did admit he might have asked for too much. So a bit of humility there at the end.
He should have just asked for the afternoon off. That would have been all right. 20 grand.
He was also described by a female colleague as slithery when he sat close. So, yeah. Another case for separating gyms and perhaps
I just want to know if
workspaces.
he nudged the burger onto the floor to begin with, or whether it was a genuine incident he was waiting for. The Daily Star next. And a story about robot canines. I've got to say, I don't see the point of robot dogs. They can't lick off peanut butter any better than the originals, can they?
No, they can't, but this is truly terrifying. And as far as I'm concerned, this is a sign that we're at the end of days.
Yeah.
Soldiers use headsets to control robot dogs with their minds in Black Mirror-style video. So this is the Australian military that has developed a headset that can convert a soldier's brain patterns into commands for robot dogs.
And we've seen the robot dogs, right? These are the Boston Dynamics dogs,
Yes.
aren't they? They sort of like...
They're scary enough.
Yeah.
Then someone said, what if we could control them with our minds? I'm like, call me reactionary, guys. I say this no to all of it. But my critique here is, I looked at a video. I think they were just moving their heads left and right to control. I'm not convinced.
You think the thing has an accelerometer in
If you were the
in
Australian
visor?
military, wouldn't you do this as propaganda? Like, oh, yeah, we can control robot dogs with our minds.
yeah.
Like, can you? Or have you just mocked it up?
But this is,
There's a guy with a remote control
well,
and
no,
you're
in
blinking.
theory, this does exist, because this is Elon again. has
Elon,
got
the
this,
monkey
hasn't he?
thing,
But
yeah.
this is for people who've had a replacement limb or something, right? They can make the replacement limb work with their brain.
Yeah, it does sound like something Jay from The Inbetweeners would say. You see what I mean? I can control robot dogs with my mind.
Let's see if we can squeeze one more in just before on to the Metro, Nick. And if Sam Smith isn't here to make friends, it sounds like mission accomplished.
Yeah, this is Noel Gallagher misgenders Sam Smith and labels them an effing idiot. And he just basically...
Not only misgendered.
yeah. I mean, that was the least of it. But yeah, he just basically said, look at him, saying that he's being an idiot. And it's quite funny because Smith himself here talks about saying it's who I've always been. Doesn't he mean who we've always been?
Yeah.
It's very confusing.
Well, the show is nearly over, so let's take another quick look at Tuesday's front pages before we let you go, either to bed or to begin your day. The Daily Mail has Rishi done the impossible. The Telegraph, Sunak, my deal is a new way forward. The iPaper has Sunak secures breakthrough on Brexit as tensions loom. The Guardian, PM hails new chapter in relations with EU after Northern Ireland deal. The Mirror has evil's end. Serial killer's ashes were scattered at beauty spots, says niece, that is Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper, fouling up some of the most beautiful countryside in Britain. The Metro, you can put the oven on. And those were your front pages. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's show. Thanks to my wonderful guests, Francis Foster and Nick Dixon. I have been Simon Evans. I am now going to go and see where my reputation lies on social media. Headliners is back tomorrow at 11 with me in the driver's seat. No, not tomorrow. Not sure who it is. Josh Howie and Roger Monkhouse, though, will be on the panel. And if you're watching the 5 a.m. repeat for some mad reason, good morning. Stick around for the breakfast show next.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz,